You may remember that when abortion on demand began, many, and indeed I'm sure many of you, warned that the practice would lead to a decline in respect for human life, that the philosophical premises used to justify abortion on demand would ultimately be used to justify other attacks on the sacredness of human life, infanticide or mercy killing. Tragically enough, those warnings proved all too true. Only last year, a court permitted the death by starvation of a handicapped infant.
Now, savagery and torture comes in various flavors, and they have various methods of instigating this killing called abortion. Now, the first method I want to talk about is called dilation and curettage. It's called D&C, they shortened it. Now, what they do here is they take a cutting tool into the woman's uterus, and then they cut the baby into pieces, legs, arms, torso, and whatnot. And after the mutilation is complete, the scattered body parts of the child, they just kind of scrape it out or pull it out. The next one is called suction. Now here they open up the mother's birth pathway, her birth canal, and they stick a sort of very powerful vacuum into where the uterus is and where the baby is growing. Now the vacuum is extremely powerful, so it literally sucks out the baby piecemeal. It tears them apart. It's like a tornado. The next process is by poisoning the baby. Now this is very controversial because all the means that they use to do it is very dangerous for the woman as well. Now the first one, they use a pill. It's a very popular means that's coming in effect, and it's called the RU486. Now what this drug does is that it destroys the uterus. It messes up the insides, the linings of the uterus, and it causes the baby to end up starving to death. So it is yet another horrible means of torture for these poor children, and there's quite a lot of bleeding involved on a woman's part. The next one is called the prostaglandin abortion. Now this ties into the drug-induced abortions because what they do is that they inject a hormone into the uterus. Now the uterus, this big muscle where the baby is sleeping, what it does is it contracts, and what happens is that the baby is born. Now many times the baby is born alive. It doesn't kill the baby right away, so the baby ends up getting born alive. Now what I mentioned about the infanticide policies that are going on is that when the baby is born and it survives the abortion, they say that now you're going to have to kill it anyway. Now this is a very scary thought. I mean, imagine you're right next to this procedure, you're seeing this procedure done, and you see the baby, instead of coming out dead as the abortion doctor wanted it, it ends up coming out crying and alive. And it's in your hands crying, and you're ordered to kill it anyway. Now this is something we haven't seen since the old camps in Auschwitz. The next one is called the saline injection. Now this is the salt poisoning. Now what this does is that it injects the placenta and the uterus with this salt solution. Now what this does is that it kills the baby inside. It chokes its breathing fluid too. Now a baby breathes liquid just like we breathe air. And it's kind of like what they used to do to the troops in World War I, where they shelled them with poison gas and he ended up choking to death. Now this is what we're doing to the baby with the saline injection and with the salt poisoning. Now the saline injection, the salt poisoning, is very corrosive to the child, and it will burn a child. It will scorch it as if it's being napalmed. Approximately 2 or 3 days later, the mother finally, labors out the dead baby, and many times the baby will end up alive here as well. And as you're about to hear, a young lady who was a survivor of the said saline injection when her mother wanted to abort her. The woman you're about to see is named Gianna Jessen. When she was a baby, her mother planned to abort her by using the poison abortion method, also known as salt abortion. She ended up surviving, and here she is to tell her story.
I'm adopted, and my biological mother was 17, and so was my biological father. She was 7.5 months pregnant when she decided to go to Planned Parenthood, which is the largest abortion provider in the world, and they counseled her to have a late-term saline abortion, which is a saline salt solution that is injected into the mother's womb. The baby gulps that solution, it burns the baby inside and out, and then she is to deliver a dead baby within 24 hours. And to everyone's great shock and surprise, I didn't arrive dead but alive on April the 6th, 1977 in a Los Angeles County abortion clinic. What's fantastic about this, about the perfect timing of my arrival, is that the abortionist was not on duty yet. So he wasn't even given the opportunity to continue on with his plan for my life, which was death. And I know that I am in a government building, and a beautiful one it is, and I love your country as well as my own. But I know in the age that we live in, it is not at all politically correct to say the name of Jesus Christ in places like this. To bring him into these sorts of meetings, because his name can make people so terribly uncomfortable. But I didn't survive so I could make everyone comfortable. I survived so I could stir things up a bit. And I have a great time doing it. And so I was delivered alive, as I've already said, after 18 hours. I should be blind, I should be burned, I should be dead. And yet I'm not. You know what is fantastic vindication is the fact that the abortionist had to sign my birth certificate. So I know who he is. And it also says, for any skeptic listening, on my medical records, born during saline abortion. Ha! They didn't win. I've done some research on the man that performed the abortion on me. And his clinics are the largest chain of clinics in the United States of America, and they gross $70 million a year. I read a quote from him at some point several years ago, and he said, "I have aborted over 1 million babies, and I consider it my passion." I tell you these things because, listen, ladies and gentlemen, we are in an interesting battle, whether we realize it or not, in this world. It is a battle between life and death. What side are you on? So a nurse called an ambulance and had me transferred to a hospital, which is absolutely miraculous. Generally, the practice at the time, and up until 2002, was, in my country, was to end the life of an abortion survivor by strangulation, suffocation, leaving the baby there to die, or throwing the baby away.
The next one is probably the most savage method. This one's called dilation and evacuation. What happens here is that the baby inside the mother is pulled apart limb by limb, one at a time, if it's some sort of boiled lobster. Now, this process is repeated until the entire baby's body is snatched out of the uterus and it ends up in pieces on the table. They take hold of it by the tongs, they twist it. So imagine that's you right there. Imagine somebody, a large metallic object takes you by the leg, twists your leg until it's all broken and snapped, and then finally they tear it off, flesh, skin, and all. And that's what this poor child, these poor children who get aborted, go through when they go through D&E, or dilation and evacuation.